Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Municipal Mental Health Task Force Communities That Care, to our second webinar event. Very excited. I see there's a number of people here that are online with us, ready to listen to our evening's presenter. I just wanted to take a minute or two to talk a little bit about the task force. For those of you that are on the line that are not familiar, the Municipal Mental Health Task Force is something that we have been working on for the last couple of years. We take individuals from right across the province, right into Labrador, from all regions, to help us to generate ideas and information that we can put together to be able to help individuals in this province just talk about mental health, have more information about mental health, mental illness, mental health and wellness, mental struggles, whatever language it is that you want to be using, it's something that affects all of us. And so our task force came into play a couple of years ago. As I've said, we have a number of individuals who meet with us monthly to talk about these things, to generate these ideas that we can bring forth to lobby with provincial government and other stakeholders to see what it is that we can be doing better. How can we be helping our residents? How can we be helping our municipalities, communities, and how can we be helping each other? So we are always recruiting individuals, especially from beyond the overpass. We're really always looking for individuals representing other regions outside of the Avalon. And so if anybody after this evening is interested in more information, please feel free to touch base. I would love to connect with you and provide information. We've been really busy the last few months. COVID kind of held us back, like it has with everybody. But we have been busy getting things organized. We are so thrilled to have our monthly webinars set up now. So this will be coming to you each month with a different speaker with different information for you. We have been applying for funding that we can receive, hopefully from the government, if accepted, to provide different types of educational opportunities and awareness and training across the province. We have been working together to develop resources. We have connected and partnered with the ministry or with the department, excuse me, and the minister to the director of mental health and addictions to be able to, again, just have people helping us get things to the table that's required. So there's a lot going on. We have a newsletter that's coming out, like minutes, I want to feel like saying, but definitely within the next few days that you can certainly look for. So again, please feel free to reach out if you'd like some more information. I've got a great team that's working with us behind the scenes, and we're just really happy to be here and really proud to be able to be bringing some kind of change and effect to what is required. So enough about me chatting. I just want to make sure people were aware of sort of who we are and how we came to be. But this evening is really all about giving an opportunity for someone to come and take the floor to talk to us still again about mental health and emergency responders, I think is something that's paramount present day, especially with what's happening around us in the world with the pandemic. And anything else in particular. So really excited to welcome Craig Smith with us here this evening. He is the president of the International Association for Firefighters, Local 1075, I believe. And so he's going to take the floor now away from me, and he's going to spend the next period of time, 45 minutes or so, chatting with you. And he'll let you know what his format's going to look like, and we'll be here behind the scenes to help out with whatever's required. So sit back and enjoy. And thanks again for your time this evening. And over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Tina. Usually when I do my Zoom meetings, I'm more of an in-person discussion and a chatty guy. I like being able to see people's faces, but all I can see is my own face on my screen. So it's a little bit different, not being able to engage with people and be present with somebody. So I can't apologize for that. It's the times we're in. So like Tina said, I am the president of the St. John's Firefighters Association. We are international, so we operate out of, our union is through United States and Canada. We have approximately 323,000 firefighters and paramedics throughout North America. That's part of our union. Our international is somewhat of a unique union in that we represent all, I should say, 98% of career firefighters throughout North America. We have 180 staff in Washington, D.C., where our head office is, and we have numerous divisions within our international, and mental health and behavioral health is one of those. So I'm a career firefighter with St. John's. I've been on the job for 23 years this coming July. I've been a member of all special teams for the last 16, 17 years. Those special teams incorporate helicopter rescue, where I'm a safety officer and technician, high angle rescue, cold water, surface water, hazmat, and confined space. And I think it's important that I'll get into it in just a little bit of identifying my participation in the department and some of the roles I play. The mental health, this is I didn't have a program or an agenda. I'm just told, as the briefing was with Tina, about the mental health task force and what the initiatives are and what the objectives are, and what are things, what are things going to look like going forward. And I think it's fantastic because there has to be a starting point in no matter what we do. It's one of the most important things is dealing with, in my position, we do a lot of political action because we're the hub in the capital city and is where the provincial government's offices are. We advocate a lot for all firefighter, first responder issues. We advocate right across the island, to be honest with you, and because there's representatives here from across the province in smaller regions. One of the things I'd like to point out before we get into what the topic is, which regarding to mental health, is that when we, as a career department, and just point of information, St. John's we are the 18th largest department in the country that represents over 180 affiliates with our international. So even our own members sometimes think that we're the smaller group in the smaller department. But in all honesty, we're in the top 12, top 13% in the country as far as size, which is important. And the reason for that being important is that we have a sense of responsibility. We feel, those who sit on my executive and myself personally, is that when we do advocate for any initiatives or any issues, especially when it's an advocation towards government for legislation changes, is that and just recently in November when we did the stat review presentation through workplace mental health and through provincial government, when we advocate for firefighters. And my philosophy is, and I'm not going to say share, but my philosophy as an individual, as Craig Smith and as president of this association, my philosophy is that because I'm a career firefighter, I don't draw a line between career and volunteers. I think somewhat, again, I've been around for 20 plus years. I think that's somewhat of an old school mentality. I feel, and I'm not sure if the word is correct, some may not agree with me, but for any of those who know me personally, I tend not to bite my tongue, and I'm pretty honest about my opinion, is I feel there's somewhat of an ignorance within that mentality. And that mentality has existed for a very long time. And I've been very strongly opinionated within my own local that when we represent firefighters, we represent all firefighters, unless it's specific issues when we're coming to collective agreements, specific issues when it regards to our own employer being the city of St. John's and the two regions, Paradise and Mount Pearl, who contribute to it. PTSD, as what this topic is around, as we all know, there was a legislation that was created by the previous premier on PTSD. And that PTSD legislation is not segmented to career firefighters. That PTSD legislation, when we were advocating for it, was for all first responders and all firefighters, not just St. John's and career, not just in Corner Brook, not just in Stephenville that represents the international, but there's more than 6,000 volunteer firefighters across this island. And that's a lot of people doing a lot of good work for their towns and for their regions, with the only expectation they have is to show up and do their best they can. And I really feel sometimes that that somewhat the appreciation for what they actually do and what they step up to do is not given to them in the deserving nature that it should be. And when I advocate for it and when I reach out to some volunteer organizations, I always advise them that my phone is there, my email is there, and never hesitate to reach out. Anything that I learn, anything that any knowledge I'm gaining, and anything that I'm doing, I have no problem sharing it with anybody, whether it be career or fire or volunteer agencies, firefighters across Newfoundland and Labrador. And I think that's a very good point. And I don't think it's widely known. I don't think a lot of volunteer fire departments are aware of that, or firefighters in particular. But it's I want to express that because I'm assuming that the majority of the audience here tonight are from smaller towns where you have volunteer firefighters representing you. And I'm just being advised tonight that some municipalities even have paramedics that are employed in some way, shape, or form by your municipalities. So just to give you a little briefing on that. In the notes, it was mentioned that I'm going to speak of mental health, how we have worked towards improving mental health in our own department, in our own association. And in the last 5 years, there has been a tremendous amount of work put into that. And there's a chronological order of events that's taken place from 2015 until present day. This subject and this topic, I have a stack of paper and binders in front of me that courses I've done and training that I've been presenting, or training that I've been involved in, or courses that I've presented as an instructor. And 40 minutes is really not going to even touch the tip of the iceberg. It's, as you're aware, it's a very dynamic topic, mental health, and especially when it comes to first responders, because it is so specific to first responders. The trauma first responders face is unique in itself, and it's unique to what we refer to as civilians and civilian trauma. And therefore, as a result of that, it requires very specific training. It requires specific recognition, not just on ourselves as individuals, as firefighters and police, paramedics, corrections officers, and so on and so forth. But it's important to educate community, our municipal leaders, provincial government leaders, and it's important to have recognized and identified that we all suffer from mental health. We all have mental health. We all have stresses in our lives. But the trauma that first responders see is a very different, it's a very unique trauma. And that's where you get into fire department peer support systems. That's where you get into mental health support systems, whether it be through Canadian Mental Health or private companies that teach this, or whether you listen to a psychologist or a clinician or a psychiatrist. The first responders' mental health, it's not as, getting assistance with firefighters or police is not as easy, and it's not easy for anybody in the general public, but to find a medical professional that is specifically trained in first response trauma, in Newfoundland and Labrador in particular, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. There's a lot of counselors that have a broad range of counseling and broad range of education behind them. However, a lot of them will admit that first response trauma that's witnessed, compounding trauma that's witnessed, is very unique in itself. I give an example sometimes of people when they ask, close friends of mine, I don't share a lot of my experiences from my job, because I feel that it's not that I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to I find it creates exposure to individuals when I refer to anything that I've experienced. The first responder trauma is compounding, and first responder trauma is, in my career, it's probably been thousands. And if anybody in this room can probably count on one hand how many times they've witnessed or come across a tragic event whereby 911 or an emergency services number had to be called. So typically in an individual's lifetime, you may have one or two of those events where you're the one that initiated a call for assistance or the 911 call. That call is experienced by your firefighters in your community. In my particular situation, not only have I experienced that individual singular event that has caused stress or caused trauma, acute or long-term trauma for the person who witnessed it and experienced it and made that phone call, but I've been involved in literally thousands of those 911 calls. I've responded to thousands of those calls, thousands of tragic events. Too many that I'd like to even think about as far as fatalities and deaths and all the circumstances that comes around those things. So your firefighters are exposed to similar incidents and same instances as I am. The volume of those calls that they respond to may not be there, but the significance of those responses, the significance of those calls, and the impact that it has on your members is just as significant as it is for any career firefighter or any career paramedic across this province and across this country and across North America and across the world for that matter. So it's important to understand that when we try to look at mental health, behavioral health, and healthy and respectful workplace, it's the understanding that these individuals have compounding problems or compounding stresses and compounding tragic and trauma events, in addition to being human, in addition to being a member of society, in addition to having our own personal struggles and our personal stresses, whether it be relationships, finances, substance abuses, family members who are experiencing those that you're impacted by it, friends who have had traumatic events that they've shared their experience with you because you've been that shoulder to lean on. And in that situation, people have the potential of being exposed to vicarious trauma, which is a trauma that's experienced by somebody who wasn't physically at an event, but they share or empathize or relate to someone who has shared those experiences. What I would like to do is, I mean, there's a lot of information here that I could share with you. Before I just get into give you some of the history and the background of my education, these sort of discussions. I like being I like to have a lot of communication, a lot of discussion, a lot of questions, dialogue that everybody can bounce things off. And I feel that's where everybody gets to learn and share their experiences. And I'm not sure, Tina, I know you said you had some questions that came forward earlier, but I really would like this to be a somewhat of a Q&A session for us. Me personally, I know I'm not going to be able to cover anything within as far as developing systems and courses that we do in the context of what's in the courses, but I'd like to be able to have some takeaways myself because I am very interested in mental health. It is my baby here in this department, and I'm invited and involved in a couple of other outside initiatives when it comes to mental health and campaigns, mental health outings, support networks, recognizing where the loopholes are or where the gaps are in certain things. So for me personally, I participated and been involved in mental health for the last 6, 7, 8 years as far as educating and instructing and so on. There's a program called, what was at the point in time in 2017, it was R2MR, Road to Mental Readiness. And in 2015, it was back up in 2015, we had recognized as a department that we were having members some members who were experiencing trauma, experiencing personal issues, and we were wondering why, what was happening, what were their concerns, and how come it was sort of behind a closed curtain that we were hearing about these things. There was no direct communication. And prior to 2015, we had what was called a CISM, and some people may be aware what the acronym is. It's Critical Incident Stress Management. And for 20 years almost in this department, I was a bit critical of it. As a career department, as a union, and as having been under contract with our employer, the members of that CISM program, CISM team, Critical Incident Stress Management team, they were selected by seniority in our department, and it was done that way for many, many years. I never agreed with it. I thought it was completely backwards. It served no purpose. I felt it was doing an injustice to what the CISM was supposed to do. CISM and peer support is about, first of all, it's about having trust in those who are standing next to you, trust in your peer supporters. And our department just selected those CISM members because they were senior in the department, not because our mutual peers wanted them there on the list, is because they were senior. They got hired the day before me or a year before me, and therefore they were the ones put on the list. So when I got involved in this a few years back, I said, the first thing we have to do is eliminate that. That's complete nonsense. It's basically putting us backwards. It's not making us step forward, it's making us step backwards. So one of the steps we did, we recognized that the department was agreeing on that, and they relied on us to educate them. They relied on us to help format a peer support and a better mental health program. So we eliminated the CISM program, and we introduced what's called a peer support training system. And a peer support training system is exactly what the words say. It's a peer support. We support our peers. So what I wanted to have done back in 2015, 16, I wanted our peers, I wanted our members to decide for themselves of who would be a peer support team member. At that point in time, even those who were choosing the members, they didn't understand how important that was. Present day, they're all well aware of it, but it's important to have people who are trusted, people who, not everybody is the one that wants to have their door knocked on. Not everybody wants to go and ask those hard questions and ask those tough questions, because dealing with peer support and dealing with mental health and dealing with people who are in crisis, especially when it comes to major substance abuse, or if somebody has suicidal thoughts or suicidal tendencies, it's not an easy thing to do, to look someone in the face and say, are you going to kill yourself? And That's how direct it has to be when it comes to being a peer supporter. If you're dealing with someone who has given symptoms and based on your assessment that they are suicidal. So we restructured the system. We created peer support, and our peers, our team members right now were chosen by their coworkers. We put out a poll and we asked, if you had to pick 3 people and to be a peer supporter who you would actually call yourself individually, who would they be? Who would be those 3 names? And from that, we had 30 or 40 people who basically accumulated the majority of the votes. And that's how we made a determination of who those peer supporters would be. It wasn't an automatic thing because they had to agree to it. They had to understand what their commitment would be and what it's going to look like going forward. So that's what we did with CISM. CISM is a good program. It gives you a lot of tools, puts in your toolbox, but it's only for acute. It's only immediate. And mental health, it's important for mental health to be a continuation of support. It's not today, it's not tomorrow, it's next week, and it's next month, and it's next year. And it's the fact knowing that people who are employed by you or those who are co-workers know that this is an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing support network that my employer supports and my co-workers support. So into that, I took part in some training with Queen's College. I did a Queen's College mental health workplace program. Myself and another gentleman in this department did that. The R2MR, as I said, we had 3 people from the union that did the instructors program and 3 from management. We felt it's extremely important to show that this is a cooperative effort, a cooperative initiative. It wasn't just all union. And I know I'm going to speak union-wise because I'm representing the union, but I'm dealing with mostly volunteer agencies. But you understand the perspective and the ideology around it. Is that I wanted to have a joint effort whereby my firefighters and our firefighters didn't feel it was all one-sided. They needed to feel that they had the support, not only from their peers, but just as importantly, and probably more importantly for some, that they had the support from their employer. They had the support from their management team. They had support from their chiefs, their mayors, their city councilors, and their city managers. That's extremely important. And I was very adamant on that we have to do this together as a joint effort. I want to have an equal number of union instructors with management instructors. That rolled into that even when we did debriefings, I wanted to have both a representative from the union, both representative from management, if at all possible, and if our members were comfortable in doing so during debriefings. Also at that point in time, we created a peer support behavioral health committee or a department as I expressed earlier. We formed a behavioral health committee and we introduced peer support training. It's a 2-day program with online prerequisite programs that we have to do. I've been involved in that, and I'm in the process of actually becoming a peer support instructor for our international. I sit on the behavioral health committee. Our international throughout North America is broken up in 15 districts, and Montreal to St. John's is referred to, and we're captured under what's called the 15th district. So Montreal firefighters, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland. Any of those provinces have International Association of Firefighters, IAFF members under their provincial or within those provinces. I represent all those firefighters on our behavioral health committee. So I sit once every 6 months or every 4 months or whenever is necessary with 15 other team members from Vancouver to St. John's to California to Florida and everywhere in between. And collectively, North American perspective, we gather all of our information and we see where our priorities are, and then we discuss the best case initiatives. What could be the next possible training? Where can we spend our money wisely? What are the demands? What are the needs? Where are resources? And all those things that are captured under behavioral health. It's a passion for me. It's not like a task. I don't get paid for any of those extra committees. I don't get any kind of outside of having a self-gratitude of knowing I'm giving back to those who I work with and those who are around me and those who communicate with me. It's more about passion, and I think this was developed in me over a 14 year period of suffering. At the time I shouldn't say suffering, of having my own experiences as a team member, as I said earlier, helicopter and high angle in particular, an East Coast Trail, and being in the Avalon, the capital city region, where we see a lot of tourists, as do everyone. I've been involved in a lot of recoveries, and retrievals, And that's have impacted me over the years. That's on the sidebar, but I mean, as a firefighter and running medical calls and fires, I've had my own experiences of mental health. And it wasn't until recent years, in the last 4 or 5, that I realized that my own mental health was suffering. And it was suffering without myself even knowing it. It wasn't recognized. I didn't have the training. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the resources, and I wasn't given it. I wasn't provided. The old school mentality was, I remember my very first hanging by suicide. And when I talk about this, sometimes I may get a little bit emotional. I won't cry. I may cry, I may not. And I really don't care if I do or not, because that's just how I am right now. But it's the emotions coming out of me, because these emotions that I feel, I'm very comfortable in expressing it, no matter who's my audience or who's in front of me. If you were asking me who knows me personally, they would not think that Craig Smith would be the one to break down in tears while he's giving a webinar. That's not I'm a sort of a type A. I've always been that aggressive, assertive person. Get out of my way, the bull in the china shop. Nothing can hurt me, nothing can harm me. But was I ever wrong? My experiences led me to the point where I had recognition in my life. And it wasn't until I actually spent about 6 months before I picked up the phone and called a counselor's number and said, you know what? I'm being told that I should come in and see you. I didn't say I wanted to come in and see you. I said, I'm being told I should go see you. And it was with extreme reluctance and extreme, I guess at the time, regret of even wanting to reach out, because I felt I didn't need it. Mental health, I'm not bothered by mental health. None of that bothers me. Yeah, I can remember every single detail, but I'm not a professional. I'm a firefighter. I'm a peer supporter. I study a lot of mental health training in first responders. I educate myself as much as I can, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a counselor, which is important to know. It's incorporated within these trainings of where my role is and where it begins and where it ends. That point that I make about trauma is, and me not wanting to express myself years ago, or me not wanting to talk about it years ago, didn't do me any good. As I said a minute ago, my very first suicide by hanging, I remember to this day. And it was myself and another gentleman who got hired with me in 1998. We're 2 rookies. I think it was our 3rd or 4th month in the job. And we went to a call downtown. And I mean, I don't want to sound, I'm not going to provide too much detail, but I feel it's important to understand the scenes that we experienced. We were into a basement that was 5 feet high, and there's a gentleman at the end of a rope, and he was about 6'3" tall. So here I am, 4 months into the job. I'm walking downstairs, a possible suicide. His mother found him. And I'm walking into the basement, and I'm only 5'10", 5'10 and a half. And I'm walking the basement, I'm ducking down to get underneath the floor joists. And my brother who was next to me, Brad, he was taller than me. And when we came around the corner, here's a gentleman who's hanging from the end of a piece of rope. His mother was obviously extremely emotional, and he was on his knees. And 22 years later, I could probably write a page on how that impacted me today. 21 years ago, it was nothing. I felt pathetic. Someone lost their life. I felt sad for the mother who lost her son, but I didn't think it impacted me at all. I get out into the truck, and the captain says to me, "Everybody good back there? We're all good, right? We're all good, right?" I'm supposed to say at 23 years old, 30-year veteran. He turns around and says, "Yeah, we're all good, right? We're good, right? Yeah, we're good, Cap. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, it's not a big deal." It was a big deal. It was a big deal then, and it's a big deal now. It's a big deal now for the recruits that are going through the hiring process of St. John's Regional who will be hired in the next 60 to 90 days. It's a big deal for them. It's a big deal for those who got hired 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and every other recruit that got hired since that first experience for me in 1998. Those experiences can be verbalized, but those experiences cannot be shared with somebody. And for anybody in this room who's ever had to pick up that phone and dial 911 because you experienced and witnessed an accident or witnessed a tragic event, you can reflect yourself, and you can watch the news and see an accident, and you can watch CNN and NTV and whatever else you want to look at the internet. You can watch a horrible accident on the TV. And you all, if anybody here has been on scene of a witness of an accident or a traumatic event, pick up that phone, 911, you can all relate that what you felt, your emotions, your gut, your mind, everything was undescribable. It wasn't even close to relating to watching that scene on TV. And the point is that it's impossible to relate to the experiences of firefighters in your communities, unless you're the one walking side by side, shoulder by shoulder into those communities, and these communities that they probably know, in all likelihood, who Harry is and who his wife is and who his brother and his sister and his cousin and his nephew and when his birthday is and what he had for lunch yesterday. They're probably going to know very intimately who they are responding to, which adds a completely different significance to the role they play in your community. And I say that because me personally, I've just in the last 24 months recovered one of my own best friends in Terranova 2 years ago. I'm not sure if you've seen it on the news. And he went off a bridge with a moose hunting accident. And I got off a 24-hour shift. And at 8:30, my phone rang and said, Keith's got into an accident. Can't find him. 5 hours later, I was on the scene. 18 hours later, I'm in a chopper with an RCMP officer and a helicopter pilot from Universal who actually runs our helicopter rescue, because nobody on the scene had helicopter training. No one had recovery training. And I recovered my own best friend from that river after we found him 6 or 7 minutes later and retrieved his body. And I say that out loud because those firefighters in your communities, and I know damn well that there's nobody in your community that they don't know. There's nobody in your community that you don't know. So on top of having this personal impact, on top of having the trauma, on top of being a firefighter, on top of all the things that encompasses mental health and trauma events and tragic events that affect us, your firefighters in your community have an extra burden on their shoulders because it's more of a personal experience. And that personal experience that I felt was my third time involved with people who were close to me over the years. But that one in particular still strikes me to this day every time I think of it. And when I speak to you as municipality leaders and whoever's on this line here, I say that because I understand what they feel, because they've been to car accidents, and I'm sure they've been to a medical call. I'm sure someone's passed away, whether it be natural causes or otherwise. And I can relate to every firefighter in this province, 6,000+ volunteers who experience tragic events, but experience them with a more personal connection. And as a result of all those things I've just said, shouldn't have to be emphasized of how important it is for you to be here listening tonight, you to be here to write your notes and ask more questions and do more follow-ups, and how important it is for probably your brother or your father or your uncle or your sister or your aunt who puts on those bunker gloves and that firefighter's helmet when that call comes in and responds to whatever it is expected of them. They are your relations and they're your close friends. And these are the experiences they feel, and these are the experiences they carry with them. And I don't know if they share them or not, but I know in our region, in our country, we have a very, very small portion who feel that because of stigma is capital STIGMA, capital stigma is one of the most leading downfalls of anyone seeking mental health assistance or speaking out about a traumatic event that they experienced. And they feel they just got to pull their boots back on, put their pants back on, pull their boots back up, and get back on that truck and go back to work the next day. And that is normal. There's nothing normal about what they witness. Absolutely nothing is normal about what the firefighters in your communities witness. They are witnessing abnormal events, and they're witnessing abnormal events on a regular basis, depending on your region, depending on where you are as far as the highway systems and byway systems go in the province. Probably more than even those in the community. Any communities on the Trans-Canada Highway that are volunteer agencies, they're seeing their tragic events of high-speed collision car accidents, fatalities, and I can only I do really sympathize right across the province, because I know where the resources are. Resources are limited. We took it upon ourselves to create our own resources here internally with peer support, with mental health training, with all the advocacy that we do. We you know what, if someone else can't take care of us, we have to take care of ourselves, and we're really striving to do that. And as a result, our advocacy with provincial governments and workplace NLs on PTSD legislation and how those people are impacted not only helps us, but helps even the smallest towns in the province, whether it's a fire department of 4 or 40. So before, I don't want to get into anything as far as peer support or the big 4 or mental health continuum models or strategic or planning of that, because it's really, I'm afraid that I won't even get to touch the surface, and I won't be able to answer I won't be able to answer all the questions. So Tina, I'm not sure. I'd like to be able to get, if there's any questions there that are coming to me now in generalization format, and if there's anything there that would require further explanation or elaboration, I'd be happy to give you my email, and those individuals and whoever's online and whoever's interested in learning more or asking questions, they can send me an email, and I'll definitely respond to them and provide whatever information I can. But I'd like to be able to go forward with whatever questions you have there and see if we can cover off some of the general suggestions that's there.
For sure. What we're going to do now, Craig, thank you so much for that, and thank you for sharing. We're going to actually take a second now, and Bradley Power is going to let all of our attendees into the room. So you're not going to be all alone anymore. You're going to see a whole lot of faces now.
Perfect.
And so for those of you that are on the line, you're going to be brought into the room now, so you can feel free to turn your camera on or off. It would be fine to have it on. While people are coming into the room, I do want to give a big shout out and a thank you. I see that the town of Portugal Cove St. Phillips is well represented with our co-chiefs and some of our firefighters. And so thank you folks for taking your time this evening to join us, and to all the rest of you as well. So what will happen now is you're entering the room. Brad is going to be monitoring from his end. And if you have something that you would like to say, a question that you have for Craig, or just a statement you'd like to make, just unmute yourself or raise your hand. I think there's a way to be able to raise your hand with reactions. Either raise your hand in your screen, we'll look for you, or with your reactions, or just unmute and you can start to talk. And so I see most everybody is there. So that's great. We had a huge turnout, Craig. So that's lovely.
No, I think I see quite like familiar names.
Yeah, not quite like your association with 4,000 delegates, but you know, we're on the cusp. So
so if there's anybody that would like to 4,000 delegates on Zoom, it was I'm not sure what kind of work with on the back end, but it was amazing work.
Very busy. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to open up with my first question for you, Craig. I had an opportunity to chat with some people earlier that weren't able to attend, but they were curious, and they'll certainly be able to follow up with the recording afterwards. But so there's a couple of things here that I think are kind of cool questions, and so I'm going to put them to you. Recognizing, of course, that you folks are always responding to the unknown. You have no idea what you're walking into. And so whether you've been on the job for 5 days or 50 years, I'm sure the anxiety is still there every time you're about to walk into a situation or walk through the door. And so the question is, dealing with biohazards every day, whether it be whatever that might look like, whatever those biohazards might be, what exactly, in your opinion, makes this pandemic different for first responders? It's not like you haven't walked into places before at risk of contracting different things, but so what makes this different, if anything?
Well, it's I know there's a few police officers. I've seen one name there that I know with the RNC on screen. Hi, Suzanne. Firefighters in general. I can't speak on the training levels that goes across the island through the FES, through the Fire Commissioner's office. As firefighters, we're typical. We've been running the burning buildings. We have bunker gear. We have breathing apparatus. We have protective equipment. So all of our PPE, and you're through your course and your training, you know, you're trained to be comfortable with your PPE, to be confident within it, and understand its limitations. As firefighters and paramedics in particular, because we are dealing more often with close personal contact with those, we always have hepatitis, HIV, any bloodborne pathogens is always at the top of mind, and always has been at the top of mind when we respond to any call. Our rolling into COVID, and I can speak as our department as firefighters, we treated this as no different. Decon, hazmat is not a hazmat, but the hazardous materials section of it and how you respond to it, how you mitigate it, how you protect yourself, how you decon yourself. You know, that's sort of part of our everyday thing. We are already prepared to protect ourselves from blood pathogens or airborne contaminants. Masks, goggles, shields, gloves, how we don them, how we doff them, and how we decon during and afterwards. So this COVID, I think the stresses that our members felt wasn't so much about responding to the calls. It was more about the stress that it was felt by our families at home and society in general, in the community. And just in my own station and my own rotations crews, you know, we had these conversations, and our members, the ones I spoke to directly, they didn't feel uncomfortable responding to COVID calls. In the last 2 weeks, this B117 UK virus being 70% more contagious, even at that point in time, what was expressed to me was their concern for their families and their children, not so much their concern for them. We have some members who question protocol and question policy and question how we respond, but it's going back to trusting your equipment, trusting your PPE, knowing its limitations, knowing that I can go into a COVID positive patient's house today, which actually I worked every day since last Monday pretty much, but in the last 3 or 4 days, I had 4 or 5 cardiac arrest calls. 2 of them were in a COVID positive house. I left that house and came back to my station clean. I got into my apparatus clean. I came back into my building clean. I had no concerns about myself. I had no concerns about me being contagious or contracting the virus because we have proper PPE. We know how to wear it. We know how to use it. We know the limitations of it, and we know what it's going to protect us from. So the stresses that we felt with COVID, especially in the last 2 weeks, and as you've seen in the news, we had 31 of 176 firefighters taken into the system, 51 in total over a 5-day period. That wasn't about COVID itself. It was about the stresses that we felt was about the family stresses, and they were having cumulative stress added to them in fear of going home with the same uniform on that they were at work with. So as far as St. John's Regional, as far as our firefighters go, once we reiterated training, we brought in our APRs, we told them, refreshing up on your face pieces, refreshing up on your respiratory system, refreshing up on your Tyvek, making sure you're secure, making sure it's on tight, double gloving, so on and so forth. And once we provided that training to them, we brought their level of anxiety, their occupational, because there's multiple stresses. This particular case would have been an occupational stress or an operational stress. Sorry, we dealt with the occupational stress through PPE, through providing our equipment. We dealt with the operational stress by giving people a tutorial and putting on our training schedule that, hey, listen, this is what we have in place. This is what you're taught. This is what you need to know. Again, refresh yourself for your own protection of those that you're working with, and more importantly, protection for your family. So the stress that we felt, Tina, and that we witnessed was more about the families at home and the fear of us bringing something back to them. That was what we've seen the most.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. And that would have been part of that question, is the feelings that people are taking home with them. Are they going to be responsible for making their family sick, or is something going to happen? So thanks for that. And then just to follow up with that, you made mention through your chat that it's really important for the employer to be supportive. And so myself, those of you that know me, my husband also is a firefighter. I know that they are, on the job, they're really struggling where they are with isolation and lack of manpower and things like that. So what is it that you would say to those that are in the room? Because I do see that there's a number of first responders there. What would you say to them, or to the chiefs and administrators? What should the chiefs and administrators be ensuring, or what should our firefighters be asking for or about from a supportive perspective?
Well, it's a good question, and there's probably multiple answers to that. But first and foremost, what we've managed to accomplish in St. John's in the last 6 years, myself and the 2 other gentlemen who sort of spearheaded all of our mental health initiatives over the last 6-7 years and implemented it, organized it, advocated for it, facilitated it, and basically put the peer support system in place. We would have never been able to do any of that, and I mean absolutely none of that, if it wasn't for the support of our directors and chiefs and City Hall. And it's extremely important, not just a psychological portion of knowing that there's people who care about you, who you're employed by, but for them to actually not just use all words, but some actions. The very first peer support program we did was 50% funded by, we paid for it, 50% funded by this association and 50% funded by the department in the city. And just that alone, through our 200 plus members that we have, they were blown away. The department was actually putting money forward for our independent peer support training program. Long-term benefits, obviously, for the employer, but to have them on board, to know that they were advocating alongside us, not just for us, but right alongside of us, and knowing that we had their support and that we can call upon them at any point in time that we wanted to, that was a tremendous relief, and I think stress relief to the membership. So for all the municipal leaders here, I know when it comes to funding and the finances that sometimes extremely challenging and hard and difficult to isolate a piece of your budget that doesn't exist in some circumstances and filter it into a mental health component. But if you were to read and do any kind of education, the mental health side of it, the behavioral health side of your staff, and I say staff, but a lot of these people are volunteers. And I think that's probably more important to show that you're supportive of the volunteers, because they're not getting paid. They're not getting paid to come through those doors. They're not getting paid to go out through them. They're not getting paid to come in through them. So me personally, I never felt that I had support from my mayor or my municipality, and I felt that I was getting kicked to the door every time we expressed ourselves. I don't know how much motivation I'd want as an individual, as a firefighter, no matter how much I loved my job, no matter how much passion I had for it. And being volunteers in this province, I think that you need to be motivated. I think you had to have a passion for what they do, and you want to keep that motivation going. You want to show them you're committed to their mental health. And it's not just the firefighters' mental health, but in smaller towns, that filters out and ripples to all of your community, because they all have families and they're all in the community. They're sharing each other's experiences. They're communicating with each other. So I think supporting those who are there has a huge benefit to everybody in that region, or everybody in that municipality or that town. When the mayor or town councilors are saying, you know what, I don't know how we can fix this. I don't know what we need to do, but let's sit down and talk about it. Because discussion and communication is the very first step. No one has all of the answers with any of this. We're all different, depending on your demographics and the size of your department and who you're with. It may not be a mirror image of what we did. But communication and finding out what do we need and what is it that's needed is the very first thing that should happen between mayors and councillors and fire chiefs or deputy chiefs or firefighters in your towns, in your areas, is create an open dialogue first. And from the open dialogue develops trust. It develops a relationship. And from relationships, you can learn to build trust if the trust is not already there, and you understand that they have some empathy or sympathy, or they have some compassion towards what you do, and they're in support. So we all, no matter who we are, we all need to feel that we're supported. And I think that's the first thing with small towns is communicate with those firefighters and those people in your region to say, you know what, we recognize that this is a potential. We recognize that this exists, and we want to help. And how do we work together to make that happen for each other, based on your own resources and whether it's unlimited or limited.
Awesome. Thanks again, Craig. We have Brad has just put over into the chat a reminder to use the raise hand function if you'd like to ask a question. So, I mean, I could go on and ask all kinds, but oh, I see one up there. You see that from Isabel, Brad?
That would be me, yes. Craig, thank you so much for coming and doing this tonight. One of the things that stood out to me, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about it, because I'm really interested in, you said that you didn't know that you needed to talk to somebody. And I think that's a very common thing. I think a lot of people will sometimes, I guess when they could avail of services, they don't know that they can, they don't recognize things. Like, what were some of the signs that people saw in you to encourage you to go and speak to somebody?
You're right. I didn't think I needed any help. I don't need any help or anything. I can handle it all. I can take on the world, and I always have, and I always will. I'm a rock. I probably am a rock, but I'm a rock that recognizes that all rocks, work a lot better when they have a pretty face or some color onto it. And I had some changes, not so much in my professional life, but in my personal life. I came to work. I'm not sure if it makes any sense, but I come to work some days to step away and get a relief. I find I'm at my best when I'm in uniform, and I'm at my best when I'm dealing with people's worst days of their lives. I feel that's when I shine, and that's when I focus. That's what I thought it was. However, in retrospect, I was probably just adding fuel to the fire, and I was compounding everything else I have experienced for the last 16, 17, 18, 19 years. But people had said to me that I'm a very strong type A personality. Sometimes, well, I don't bite my tongue much. I don't let a lot go. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And but those who are close to me in my personal life, they seen Craig, I was irritable. I had my patience, even though I was never really never really had a whole lot of patience anyway, but I was like almost zero, like nil. I lost interest in some things that I used to do for myself. I used to be very active. I wasn't at the hockey rink no more. I didn't go to the gym at all. I gave that up. I was, I was working on involved in business outside the fire department for 13 or 14 years. And one of the big things for me personally, even though it was recognized that my irritability and my temper and my patience and my tone, my volume, and even when I was responding, that changed, I realized that I was probably overworking myself, and I was overworking myself to create my own distraction. I kept myself extremely busy. I mean, extremely busy. 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week. I was involved in real estate for a number of years, involved in a union, involved in doing my own 48 hours a week, 3 boys. And it was one night sitting at the kitchen table, which was one of those rare moments that never really happened because I had three boys who were involved in all sports. And I was very short with my son because the phone rang. And he asked me, he said, Dad, he said, why do you always have to have your phone? Why is your phone on like during supper hour? Now, we never really sat down again because of the kids' schedules. And I snapped at him. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember snapping at him and being very aggressive with him. And he was probably 9 at the time, I think. He's 15 now. He was probably 9 at the time. And 2 things occurred to me. I got to time manage. And this is not me. Like, I don't snap at my boys. Like, I might squeeze a shit out of him, hugging him to death, but I don't snap at him. And that was a wake up call for me. And I didn't think that, but I spoke to my children that way. I mean, we're all parents. We all get angry. We all yell every now and again, and with frustration. But that was a turning point for me a while back when he asked that question. And as opposed to me saying, well, Logan, that's Dad's phone and I'm busy and I was expecting a call. I almost like just growled at him in a savage way. I was like, what the hell? What's going on? And this was about a year and a half. Some people, my friends and my spouse saying, you should go talk to somebody. You should go talk to somebody. Like, why? I don't need to talk to anybody. I was in denial. Actually, is what I was. And I didn't even realize it myself until I went and seen a counselor and walked into those doors. And I thought she had a crystal ball in her hand, the way she was speaking to me over a 6 or 7 week period, because I walked into those doors and she said, what's after happened in the last week? And ironically enough, this one particular incident, the past week, was me recovering one of my best friends out of a river in Terranova. And she read me like a book. And I was like, maybe this is real. Maybe these counselors do know their shit. Maybe they do know what's going on. Maybe they actually know what they're doing. And because I guess I never had a trust level or a confidence level or never really appreciated it. But until I experienced it myself, that I had an understanding that, wow, like, I need this.
It's interesting to know what signs to look
Thanks,
for.
Craig. And oh, sorry, I thought you were going to keep going, Isabel. Yes, for sure. So, and just like that, I mean, being mindful of time, I'm going to take note that we do have 3 people waiting for questions, Craig. So I'll just say to everybody else, we'll see where the time is at after that. But like Craig had mentioned, if you have any questions after this that you didn't get to ask, you can certainly reach out to us and we can connect you with Craig for sure. But the 3 that we have, and in the order of such, we have Mr. Craig Scott, who would like to ask a question, and then he will be followed by Ashley Politi, and then followed by Suzanne Fitzgerald. And then we'll see where that puts us. So Craig, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Not only do you have the same first name as me, But as I listened to you talk about your experience, I immediately could relate to that, to a similar experience that I've had this past year dealing with COVID and dealing with council. And I was fortunate enough that I had a friend that I could reach out to that pointed me in the right direction. Thank you, Tina. And that, you know, I wonder, and I always worry about our fire department too, because my first 4 years on council, I was liaison to the fire department, and I heard about everything that was going on. And I always worried that they were getting proper mental health supports. And until this last few months, when I really found myself struggling, and I guess a turning point for me was I had a council meeting one night and I was feeling really off. So that night I went home and I re-looked at the video, and I didn't recognize the person that was sitting in the mayor's chair that night. So that was a turning point for me. And since then, I've been advocating, and I went to M&L Board of Directors, because I'm on that as well, to look at mental health supports for elected officials in many towns across the province. And a lot of people are volunteer firefighters and are members of council, like Todd, they're the deputy mayor from Ptsd. And if we are going to be having healthy communities, or, you know, we're worried about healthy communities, we need to be worried also about the leaders in those communities, that they understand what our fire department are going through, what our staff are going through. And I think that my next step is I'm going to be trying to bring forward some type of training. When we get elected to council, we get training about how to be a councillor, how to do this, how to do that. I think that we also need to start getting some training on how to recognize when you're having mental health issues. It's okay to talk about it, and you know, you don't need to suffer in silence. And
no,
you know, this is something that I would have never said 6 months ago. I'm like you. I'm a tough guy. I could everything
good for you,
off
buddy.
my back. But you know, I'm finding my way back to where I should be right now. And part of it is because I'm not worried about speaking about it. I don't give a shit who's around or what. I understand that if I had a sore finger, I'd talk about it. You know, if you got a sore brain, you need to talk about it. So I just wonder if you feel that the leaders in your community, and you said you had support from City Hall, if they get specific training so they understand the issues that our employees and our firefighters and everybody are going through, that would be easier for us to empathize and to realize the importance of providing that training and that extra support, and not worry about the dollar figure that's going to go into the budget.
Craig, you know what? Thank you for being able to be communicating that and expressing that and telling us. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy admitting that you needed help. Not easy admitting how you personally, emotionally feel. Hats off to you, brother, for doing that. No, you're right. Todd is a mayor of Port and he says a firefighter down there. He feels it from both ends. He feels stresses on both areas. The education component, not so much like the therapeutic peer support system, but in my own opinion, based on 20 plus years being involved and 10 years involved in this mental health, is that the mayors and your town councilors, if they're not involved in first responders or not involved in emergency services, is have an understanding of what mental health is. And the program that was R2MR is now the working mind of first responders. It's based around a lot of different components. Some are targeted towards police, some are targeted towards paramedics and firefighters, but the generalization of that program, and it can be condensed down, is about education and awareness, signs and symptoms, continuum models. Yes, it's specifically drafted for a police or a firefighter or a paramedic, but the overall message that's there is for everyone. I think I can present that program to everyone who is so far removed from first responders' ages, you know, to a room full of accountants, and I can guarantee you every single one of them will relate to what the topic and what the context of that educational format is. because we are all human at the end of the day. It's just my experience within my profession, but we're all human at the end of the day. And the big thing for us when we started this was the education component for our own members, because if it wasn't for the education component, really we would never have been as successful as we have been in the last 5 years. And I think that's a really good point that you made, that the education component for counselors who don't understand the calls that you go on, or calls that Todd would go on as a firefighter, and Todd is the mayor, he can sit down there until he's blue in the face and try to explain it. But Todd knows he can't explain his experience on that accident, on that highway, on that call. It's impossible. It's nobody in this world can bring out those emotions that are felt, mental and emotional feelings that are felt, physical feelings. It's impossible to do it. But we can educate people and say, listen, this is how people are impacted. This is what they will experience. We can put it in black and white. And that's all we really can do for those who are not involved in emergency services. And that is probably one of the most important things. And with St. John's, we have a nurse on staff, and we have an EAP program through Mona Chappelle that we're fortunate enough to have. But not everybody's fortunate enough to have that. So it's the education component around what mental health is, what is positive mental health, what is healthy living, and what is non-healthy living, developing signs and symptoms and recognition points. What is stress? How is stress impacted by us? So stress is not just firefighters or police or paramedics. You can feel stress working in an office building. You know, everybody could feel stresses. Some stress is good, other stress is bad. So I think the education component, Craig, is key for counselors and mayors across this island. That can be done at a very minimal cost, to be honest. And I think that there's if you were to do some research into it, and make a phone call to Workplace NL and ask them if there's any funding available for mental health programs or courses that municipalities can avail of. I think you'd be surprised what the answer would be down there. But you're right, it's education and awareness, and educating them what mental health is and how it impacts individuals, and by default, first responders and firefighters and community. So education is a key for mayors and town councilors. Thanks for sharing your story too, by the way.
Thanks, Craig. Times two. Both Craigs. Ashley?
Hi, Craig. I just want to say thanks again for tonight. So I guess my perspective is a little bit different. My husband is retired from the military, and I promise I'm not going to try to get upset, but he has PTSD. One thing I have found from being in the predicament that we're in is that the support wasn't there for spouses and kids, especially. I know there's first responders in my community who do suffer with mental health. And I know one thing after talking to their spouses that they feel like they don't really know where to turn. So if you had to give advice on where spouses can turn, or partners, just at sort of how they can cope with it, because as you know, it affects everyone. It, differently, but it does affect everyone.
Unfortunately, I don't know your history or how long your husband served in the military. But if he's been out of the military for 5 years or more, he probably had little resources and little support from the Canadian military themselves. No different than any other agency that police, fire, paramedics, and our military agencies. And he didn't know how to deal with it. And in turn, how could you know how to deal with it? And had I had my own time back, I would have sought help. I would have sought professional help. I talked about peer support earlier, but our peer support is just to ensure that our members know that they can reach out to somebody who they trust, and because trust and confidentiality is the very first thing that I would speak of. But again, I'm not a professional medical health advisor or psychologist or a medical professional. I'm a peer supporter, and I look for signs and changes in people that I work with. And I try to push them in the direction when I think that they may need professional assistance to seek counseling. And it's not always easy. It's not easy to make that phone call, walk through that door. But I guess my own experience is communication and the lack of understanding. And I think I said earlier on that I don't really talk about my own experiences outside of these four walls, or if I have friends of mine who are police officers or paramedics, they're the only ones that really speak about this, because I don't want to burden my family. I don't want to expose them to my exposures. And I always felt that was the right thing to do. And it probably isn't. There's limitations of what we should share with our husbands and wives and those who are close to us. But there's a way you can do that without exposing them to the graphic situations. You can expose them to how those graphic situations are making you feel and how it's affected you. And the communication component of any of this mental health is the hardest one to overcome, and it's the hardest one to conquer before anything happens. And it doesn't happen overnight. I try to give some advice. There's a young man at this station now who was on 2 calls with me recently, and I knew from the scene that his takeaway. I removed him from one of them. I didn't even expose him to it, but I seen that his exposure there, he was affected by it, and his wife was a nurse. And I just said, you know what? I said, I can't tell you what to do when you go home, but what I can tell you to do is that if you feel like shit, you feel like crap when you get there, tell her that you feel like crap. Tell her that you are hurting inside. Tell her this is really taking this call this evening, last night. I need to breathe. I need to rest. You know, I need to go lie down. I need to go out of my quad. I need to go whatever it is you do, because I'm really hurting. This has impacted me a lot here now, and I need to try to absorb this and process this. Even if it's something small like that, to tell you as your wife or tell your spouse, at least you understand what they're feeling. Because what I did was, I'm good. No, was it busy? Yeah, it was okay. Did you have much? Yeah, it was nothing to it. Cut the clothes. I never expressed that I was hurting. Never expressed that I was really felt like throwing up sometimes because I was thinking about it. I never expressed any of that. I sucked it all up and I buried it all in, and I didn't want to expose anybody to it. But in retrospect, I probably should have said, you know what? I feel like crying right now so hard. I feel like throwing up. I feel like I have anxiety. I feel nauseous. I feel like I don't even want to sit down. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm in a spin. They can't help you unless they're professionals, but at least they can understand how you're feeling. And just at that point in time, I think is where with relationships and marriages, I think that it could have a significant impact on how things look going forward, how your relationship looks going forward, and how that communication starts. Don't expect a lifetime of events to come out. But if someone says, you know what, I feel like crap. You know, I was thinking about something that happened years ago, and you know, I was dwelling on it because a friend of mine called me up, or I seen a post that he put on Facebook, and it just brought me back to that time we were wherever. And I've just been thinking about that. Even something small like that and significant, that helps. I know it would help me. I know it would help somebody else, just to be able to express that and say, I'm just not feeling very good right now. And in your case, there's lots of tools out there. And I know Suzanne is here, and she would have some of her toolbox about questions a spouse can ask. And the questions you ask, non-leading questions, just as simple, you know what, I understand how, I don't understand how you're feeling, but I you know, I care about you and I love you, and I want to be able to hear it. I'm here to help you. And there's nothing that you can't share with me if you want to share it, you can share it. If you don't want to share it, just know that I'm here. I'm your shoulder. Because sometimes that's all that's needed. We just need to know that that people are thinking of us, and that there's an appreciation for how we're feeling. I never did that. I made some errors in my life that I never ever did that. And I think if I had to, some things may have turned out differently for me. So small communication pieces, bit by bit. You don't have to get into long novels, just to let people know you're there and you're supportive and you understand they're hurting, understand you're feeling this way. And if you need anything, you know, I love you and I'm here. I think as a spouse or in a relationship, that's one of the key things, is to know that you're supportive, and you don't need to understand, because you know you can't understand. You know, I can't understand everything you're feeling, but I'm here for you, and you know, as your wife or as your husband.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for your question, Ashley. We have Suzanne up.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Yes. So first of all, I just want to say to municipalities, NL, if there was anybody that would be of benefit to talk about this topic, then Craig would be that person, and you're incredibly fortunate to have him, because I can tell you, I've been working on the long-term mental health strategy for the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary for almost 10 years now. And I'm learning so much from Craig. And I only met Craig, what was that, 2 months ago, maybe?
Yeah, or less than. Yeah.
Was that last month? Maybe, I don't even know at this point. It's been crazy. So I just want to say that, is it Ashley?
Yes.
Ashley,
yeah.
I want to just refer you to a book. It's a book by Kevin Gill Martin. He's phenomenal. It's emotional support for law enforcement. And it talks about a spousal program. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as well is that I do actually have a full family and spousal support program that was developed pro bono for us. I'd be happy to share that. It's not intellectual property. I can share that with municipalities NL and also with Craig as well. It's a phenomenal program. It actually incorporates bringing family into the workplace so that they get an actual feeling for what it's like for them to go to work as well. It brings them around, just a basic 25-cent tour, so to speak, but it also talks about the mental health piece, and that's incredibly important to keep our families really connected and understanding. One of the things that Craig had said, and I just want to build on this before I ask my question, because I have a legitimate question I can't wait to ask. I have many questions, actually. I'm going to be emailing you later. But one of the things that I have, my husband is not a first responder, but I have a scale. And so when I come home, if I have it's a 1 to 5 scale, I don't need to tell him anything. I don't like, vicariously traumatizing anyone else. My background, personally, I'm not only a first responder, and I have been for the last 14 years now. I'm also a compassion fatigue educator. I'm a certified psychological health and safety advisor. I'm an instructor for the R2MR. And I also own my own business doing this training as well, because I'm incredibly passionate about it. And that's why Craig and I are going to have lots of work to do in the future. I can see this right now. I'm just telling you that we're going to do lots of work together in the future. This is, it's an incredibly important program that we want to provide to our first responders. I kind of got lost there for a second because I was actually thinking about my question. Sorry about that. I'm going to just jump right to my question, and then after that, I'll go back because I think we're short on time. I'm just looking at the time there. Craig, you had mentioned that you had been advocating to the provincial government and also to Workplace NL. And I know that symptomology is incredibly important, recognizing signs and symptoms. That's a key thing in the peer support, is the key thing in absolutely everything from a supervisory perspective. We do a lot of low impact debriefings and making sure we do low impact debriefings to minimize vicarious trauma, that sort of thing. I'm wondering if anybody has really kind of advocated to, say, the Medical Association for medical practitioners to understand what compassion fatigue is, what vicarious traumatization is, organizational stressors, operational stress injury. These are all precursors and they lead into PTSD, but it seems to me is that, I understand the importance of looking at PTSD, but from a preventative measure, I'm just wondering if anybody has kind of looked at that, because I'm hearing from a lot of first responders that they're really not kind of getting the, I guess, the serious response unless it is PTSD. If you are suffering from other things, from the accumulative response, that kind of death by 1,000 cuts, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm just wondering if anybody's advocated on that path.
We have, we started about 3 years ago with with Workplace NL prior to the Ptsd legislation being implemented. And one of the things, even when I met with the Premier Ball, the Minister, Sherry Cameron-Walsh, who was Minister of Service NL at the time, and Mr. Hogan at Workplace NL, we were very vocal in the fact that there wasn't enough specifically specialty trained clinicians in the province that deals with first responders and the trauma that first responders suffer. Yeah. And it was an issue that they're aware of it. It's so then where the provincial government and where do we start and end as far as trying to retain or recruit those specialty people within that field. We've been beaten at the death across the country as far as international, to the point where some, largely in Ontario, they actually sourced out their own, the OPFFA, Ontario Professional Firefighters Association, which is a component, like we weren't state and provincial associations. They actually wanted to advocate and hire their own. They wanted to source their own out and put them on salary, because the government's obviously their cash flow and the areas of where cash has to go is is extreme, but the cash itself is limited. And then to identify specialty psychiatrists or clinicians, psychologists, and counselors who are dealing with first responders in particular, which is a specific one in itself. There wasn't enough resource. I think that this province may only have 4 or 5, and 3 of those, I believe, are employed by the RCMP. It's something that we had intended on looking at last year in 2020. However, we got off the rails in a bunch of different areas, and we didn't even start doing any kind of research, sourcing out from other provinces, because a lot of these people are professionals and they network with themselves, not just in the island, but right across the country, United States, Canada. And we were hoping to rely on our networking through our contacts across the country to find out who is, even if they're not if they're not in the island, who's in the Atlantic region area, and how could we coordinate them to bring in seminars or do maybe a regional counseling sessions or regional services, even if it's a rotational. There's some doctors here in other medical fields that rotate in on the island. Some specialists rotate here once every 3 months, and they come in and they have clinics set up for 2 weeks, and then they go back to Halifax or Ontario or Quebec, and then they come back in 3 months again. And so we're saying if we can't retain someone here full time, how do we try to bring somebody in, even if it's on a rotational basis? It's not going to meet the demands that we have, but at least it will help some people here.
Yeah, for sure. Just on, I appreciate that. And I'm going to follow up with that. You said OPPFA?
Yep, OPFFA, yeah. Ontario Professional Firefighters Association.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Just for those who are curious, my scale is a 1 to 5. So if I'm having a day of a 1, my husband might go to the liquor store for me. And if I'm having a 5, then I'm good and I can just go into the kitchen and, you know, I can hang out with the family. But it's all about having a really healthy transition ritual, you know, from work to home, and making sure you don't take that home with you, and making sure that when you come home, you're bringing something to your family other than the crumbs of kind of what's left over of you from the day. And whatever that transition kind of schedule or ritual works for you. But having a scale. So when you walk into the house, you don't need to tell them the specifics. You can just say, I had a 2, you know, it's been a 3, it's been a 4, and your family can kind of judge by that. And that way you're really kind of ensuring that you don't cross-contaminate and bring that trauma home, right? Yeah. But anyway, thank you for this. This is fantastic. I'm delighted to have found out about this. Thank you.
I'll be in touch. I think as you, we'll be talking soon. I think I got a message from Angela earlier, so I guess soon we'll be talking.
No doubt.
That's important, and I think it's really important to emphasize what Suzanne said about her level when you come home, is that she doesn't need to explain to her husband what details she had. She's using that scale. And I think that, and I wouldn't want to speak for her. However, I'm sure that once they communicated, you know, my off duty, taking the uniform off, and he'll say, you know, Suzanne, how are you today? I'm a 2. Over time, her husband will recognize, because it's mental health. It oozes out into your physical well-being, and it's very. People other than ourselves will be able to recognize that. So I'm sure her husband, when she comes home and she's a 1, before he even asks the question, I'm sure he sees in her physical presence that this girl is a 1 this morning, and I'm not going near her. Like, or he physically knows that she's a 5.
Word for word.
He's going to come in for the hug. You know, so it really comes out in a physical aspect too, and it physically for us, because probably just a little over a year ago now, I came home from a call, and it was one of the worst ones I've had in my entire career. And I came home and I felt like I was loaded drunk. I thought I was stoned, drunk. I thought someone drugged me. I felt like I was intoxicated and under the influence of so many drugs I didn't know what it was. And I was flat dead sober. It was 45 minutes after I got off shift, sitting in my shed, staring at the wall. And it was the first time in this would have been November of 2019. And it was the first time in my life I had experienced that. I felt physically, I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was intoxicated. I felt like I was drunk and under the influence of something, only because I just experienced one of the most tragic events I've ever had as a first responder 19 minutes earlier before I got home from work. At 7 a.m., I had a really bad call. And an hour and a half later, I felt intoxicated. That's how my mental health affected my physical health that morning. It was the weirdest thing. It had never happened before that. It hasn't happened since then. I hope it never does. but it just goes back to her physical appearance, how her mental appearance, how her mental mindset is affecting her physical appearance. And I'm sure if anybody had seen me that morning, they would have looked at me and thought that I probably would have given a breathalyzer had I been pulled over on my way home from work, because my mind was gone. But just it's important to know that your mental health really affects your physical health, and that's spoken in a lot of literature. And as I said about Suzanne's husband, I'm sure he can read her now when she comes home, and before he even asks the questions, he knows where she is on her 1 to 5 scale. So that's important to recognize too, that mental health is also your physical health, and physical health is your mental health.
Thanks, Craig. We have, you can see we've gone way over time, but that's okay. We're not stopping that because the discussion has been great and very powerful. We have one more question I see anyways, if you're okay, Craig, to take the last one here.
Yes, absolutely.
From Alfred Marshall.
Yes, Craig. And Tina, thank you very much for this. When I joined the fire department years ago, one of the only things I had to see a doctor for physical evaluation. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on counseling, screening, whatever, for mental health before you actually sign up for this line of work.
So I'm just going to try to. There was a couple of seconds there. I think it was on your firefighters as well, Alfred. I think you mentioned years you were involved. Is that what I got cut off there for a second?
Yeah, I joined Portugal Coast St. Philip's in 2004.
Yeah, and the question is when do you feel, or should you do pre-screening for potential candidates? Is that what the question is?
Is there a value in it? Is there value in it? Is it fair? What's the perception of it? Would you recommend it? What are your thoughts on
it? I don't know how you could do that. And I say that because how do you screen somebody and try to figure out if they're capable of handling an abnormal event that they haven't experienced yet, and that even the individuals who have those experiences cannot even predict the outcome of the next experience? I don't think you can screen individuals out based on if they're able to deal with stressors or traumatic events. I don't think that's possible, in my own personal opinion. I don't think that an individual, no matter who they are in the medical field and how many letters they have behind their name, can tell Craig Smith at 22 years old, when I got hired in this department, that Craig is going to be able to overcome and resolve any mental health issues, and that he is going to be able to rise up and come back to work, and none of this is going to affect him. I really don't think. I mean, I wish I could, but Alfred, I think that is an impossible ask. I think it's impossible to determine. I feel that I don't even think that anybody in the medical field would even suggest that, because I go back to the words. It's not the medical portion, but I go back to the word stigma. Is that we got this big guy, he's 230 pounds, he got muscles, and he got a big beard and hair on his chest, and he can lift the bus, so he can handle anything. That man could be the most fragile person in a room, and no one would ever know it. So I don't think it's possible for someone to make a determination of how someone's going to react to an abnormal event until that abnormal event happens to the individual. And so I emphasize a lot on training. When we did our recruits in 2018, one of the very first things I asked our chief director, Sherry Colford, is that I want a full day with these recruits. And I told her what I wanted for, and I wanted to go through the RTMR, which is now the Working Minds of First Responders. I wanted to spend a morning with that, doing the 4-hour course. I wanted them to give and educate them on peer support. Within that RTMR, as Suzanne mentioned, and the new anchorman, just the Working Mind, in that identifies signs, symptoms, stressors. It gives educational tools. It gives you reflection. Your own personal reflection going forward, things that you should look for and identify with, so that you can you can honestly say to yourself that maybe I need to speak to somebody about this event, because I recognize A, B, and C, and that's what I learned through my education and through my training. So we're pretty adamant on providing that tools. 2016, when we had our recruits, there was a few people who were of the mindset, well, we'll wait until next summer. We'll wait until the fall. I said, wait until the fall, or wait until next summer before you provide this mental health training to a recruit. And I gave the example, and just, it was just horrible, but the very first day on the job of the recruit process before, there was a fatality, with 2 fatalities in a very horrific car crash. And it was this guy's first day. It was first, 6 or 7 hours in the station, in the trucks. And I said, it's too late in 2 months and 3 months and 5 months and 6 months time. We got to provide this education, this training before they even step inside the doors and go operational. This has to be done no different than sizing for their uniforms. This has to be part of the hiring process. This has to be part of that toolbox that we're supposed to provide them, so that they know we have their back, and they know that we're educating them, and they're given the tools and resources that we have at our disposal, whether they're all of what we need or at least some of what we need, and it's better than doing nothing at all. So I'm more in line about educating people before they even go operational in the fire department, police department, paramedicine, and provide these tools and provide the wording, the documentation, the context is in the working minds training and in support manuals, and going from there as opposed to trying to do a pre-screening. Just this past 12 months, we have what's called a WFI, Wellness Fitness Initiative, that the International developed several years ago, about 20 years ago. And from that came our medicals and our physical mandatories every 24 months or so. But there's a behavioral health section in that. And in the last couple of years, since I've been president of this association, I formed a committee, and I wanted them to dissect that manual, and more importantly, the behavioral health component. And what I advocated for, and what's been implemented just in the last 6 months now, is a checkup from the neck up. So never mind trying to screen somebody out, because we can't do that. We can't predict how someone's going to react to it. However, join your term and join your career, whether it be volunteer or part-time or full-time, whatever the case may be. We should continue to provide mental health training, but more importantly, from my perspective, for our members, and with our biannual medicals, with our medicals and physicals every 2 years, I wanted to check up for the neck up. They take 8 or 9, 10 bottles of blood. They do urine samples and stool samples and EKGs and chest x-rays and eye exams and hearing exams and touch your toes and do your push-ups and do this and heart recovery rates and all that physical stuff. And they never once asked me, how am I doing? How am I feeling? Never once did they ever ask that question. So what's been done now, it was put in place in the summer, fall of 2020, is that now going to AOMS, the Atlantic Offshore Medical Service Center that conducts our medicals and physicals, is that when we go down there, the doctor has a checklist. It's a generic sheet. It's a mental health checkup. It's a checkup from the neck up. And that's not to tell you need to go see somebody. It's more of a self-check. It's more of the doctor asking questions out loud where you have to answer them, and only you alone know if you're answering them honestly or dishonestly. However, if you're answering them honestly, when you walk out of that doctor's office and we do this 18 to 24 questions on mental health, if I answer all of them, I'm going to know, Craig Smith is going to know if I bullshitted my way through that questionnaire. I know I'm going to bullshit my way. I know the answers I'm giving, and I know they're wrong or I know they're correct. That in itself is not going to, for the purposes of it, is not to say, Craig, go see a counselor. The doctor may say, Craig, based on your responses, and if I'm completely honest, have you spoken to any of your counselors, have you used DAP? And, there's resources out there. You don't dictate, because he's only a GP. He's not a psychologist. And so, there's all kinds of resources available to the city, and here's the EAP number. And that's about as much you're going to provide to somebody. But more importantly, it's about self-recognition. And that's what the program is, self-recognizing signs and symptoms. And that's where the key is of ongoing support for once they're employed. You can't figure out if someone's able to handle it or not, but you can give them the tools moving forward. And that's what the checkup from the neck up is giving my members, is that they have self-reflection. That's what I want. I want them to do self-reflection. I want them, when they walk out of that doctor's office, to say, boy, did I ever answer those questions dishonestly? Maybe I should go online to my EAP and send out the confidential message, and maybe I should go see a counselor. And Craig and the department and the peer support, So they're all doing it. There's people in this department. We've had 3 people in this department over the last 20 months with attempted suicide. We have maybe 35 to 45% avail of our EAP on a regular basis. It's all confidential. No one knows it. I know some personal details just because of my position, and that people trust me and reach out to me. But it's a support network moving forward and help recognizing things and educating your firefighters, especially in Portrush Cove, where you guys are sort of working side by side with us on some calls, and you're experiencing the same thing that every firefighter in this province is experiencing. I don't think it's done prior to screening, Alfred, but it certainly can help self-reflection and some mental health checkups, continuing going through. And even if you don't have a medical office or an EAP program as per se, there's all kinds of tools and online and quick questionnaires that you can pull from and print off. And you don't even have to have your members answer them. You can just provide the questions and have a member read it over. That's what it's about. It's about a person self-identifying. It's about self-identifying signs and symptoms that you're having, your mental health is being negatively impacted by your circumstances, your professional life or your personal life. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Alfred, or not.
That's great. Thank you, Alfred. And thank you to everybody for your questions. And thank you to everybody for staying and hanging in with us with this extra time. It's been a pleasure, Craig, to have you with us tonight. I'm not even really sure what to say. And those that know me will laugh when I say I'm actually almost speechless. It's been really intense and interesting and exciting to listen to you be able to talk to us and share this information with us and give so much valuable information back to the folks that are listening. The chat, just to let you know, Craig, has been blowing up with people saying thank you and letting you know how valuable and important this is. Yeah, I mean, I think it served its purpose. We'll follow up for the rest of you. We'll follow up after this to all of the participants with Craig's contact information in case you wanted to continue this conversation further at another time. Suzanne also has shared some really great resources with us. She's got in the chat here as well for those that are still on the line and have a pen handy to Google PROQUOL self-assessment tool. She's acknowledged that it's free, so free always helps. But yeah, on that, we'll leave that. We'll have this recorded, so it will be on available to people. If you want to go back to your folks and say, hey, I just saw this really cool webinar and I think it might be important and valuable for you, it will become available for people after this. And outside of that, Again, I just wanted to thank you all for participating. Again, we are the Mental Health Task Force, Municipal Mental Health Task Force. Myself, Tina Neary from Portugal Cove St. Phillips. I'm a counselor here and chair of the task force with an amazing team behind me that helps us to be able to do these things. And again, people like Craig who give us their time to be able to bring these presentations to you. So on that note, just a reminder to my task force folks, we do still have a meeting after this, so I'll see you all in a few minutes. To the rest of you, please stay safe, stay strong and stay well, and take care of one another. And Craig, we thank you again for your time.
Well, I'm super pumped about being here. The communication and the discussion and people opening up and telling their own stories. That's what it's about. That is mental health recovery, exactly what we did tonight. Everyone's sharing their own experiences, and that's where it starts from. So I have no problem sharing my experiences. I don't feel that I have to live up to anybody else's expectations, only about my own. So I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad to be part of it. And I hope something like this continues, or we can do it again. Whereas there's more people engaging in conversation, and I'm doing more listening, active listening, as we refer to it in the peer support world.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks again, and good night to everybody.